So, hi everybody, my name is Andrew, and I will be talking about the Indian Child Welfare Act. So, a little background on the ICWA. It was enacted in 1978. It's a federal law, and it has jurisdiction over removal of American Indian children from their family. This covers custody, foster care, and adoption. So, a little explanation about the ICWA. It gives tribal governments jurisdiction over children who live on reservations. It also gives something called concurrent jurisdiction over foster care placements for Native children who live outside reservations. So, concurrent jurisdiction gives something called presumptive jurisdiction, and the definition of presumption from law.com is a rule of law which permits a court to assume a fact is true until such a time as there is a preponderance of evidence which disproves or outweighs the presumption. So from my understanding, it basically means that unless there's a lot of weight to the evidence on the other side, that they will kind of go with the jurisdiction from the tribal government, or the judgment from the tribal government. So some of the reasons that led to the necessity of the ICWA were a high rate of removal of children from Native families. This got to as high as 35%. Removal of children that had family networks. So they were removing a large amount of children who had extended family. So instead of if there's a child that they felt needed to be removed, instead of allowing the child to live with like an aunt, an uncle, maybe like an older brother, older sister, something like that, grandparents, they would remove the children outside of the tribal situation. So these children were removed and placed with non-native families. And here's a quote from Bertram Hirsch. He was an attorney for the Association of American Indian Affairs. He said, "The government-sanctioned removals were a wound for Native families and tribes that would be torn raw with each new generation." So, something we talk about a lot in social work is the like intergenerational trauma, things like that. These things kind of compound down through the generations. So the rate of Native children in foster care was as much as 16 times higher than outside. And some causes of the ICWA. So Congress recognized these four factors, and they were lack of cultural competence, systematic due process violations, economic incentives to remove children, and social and material conditions of the Native population. So the first one, lack of cultural competence. This is on the part of the social workers, the courts, the government, the United States government. You kind of alluded to earlier about the extended family networks. From my reading, I kind of determined that at the time, the social workers, they gave a lot of weight to like the immediate parents of children, right? And if there wasn't at least one like birth parent present, it was grounds for removal. So in some like tribal some tribes, they kind of had more of a communal raising of the children, and a lot of emphasis put on extended family networks. And the social workers and the United States government didn't see that as valid. So systematic due process violations, economic incentives to remove children. So as you know, adoption and fostering, there's some money that can go along with that. And there were economic incentives to remove these young children from the Native families and basically sell them to non-Native families. And then the social and material conditions of the Native population. So, a lot of times the Native families were economically disadvantaged, and they were taken advantage of by the system. In one such case of that taking advantage, I read that there were approximately 5,000 children who were removed from Native families and they were given to Mormons. So this is kind of like a forced conversion type situation, which kind of, echoes the past, right, with the initial colonization of America. So the state recognizes extended family caring for children as abandonment, ignoring tribal culture. So like I said earlier, scenarios where the grandparents, aunts, uncles, older siblings were raising the children, if there wasn't at least one parent there, the state recognized that child as abandoned and thus able to be removed from the home. And then we have the paternalistic, culturally incompetent social work system. So paternalistic, basically meaning that the social workers thought they knew better than the Native families. And when you combine this with their cultural incompetency, it was a recipe for removing these children. Basically, we know how to raise your children better than you do. So there have been some challenges to the law. It's been challenged multiple times. In 2018, some parts were struck down on the grounds that it mandated racial preference. So basically saying that on the grounds of race that there should be bias given towards the Native families. Later that year, the judgment was stayed on grounds that it violated tribal sovereignty. And in 2019, it was actually ruled that the law did not violate equal protection, and thus it remains still in effect. So, thank you for listening.